Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. We're here today to talk about Battlefield. Yeah, we're doing more Battlefield, I know, right? I don't know, I'm just on a Battlefield kick, guys, and I really want to just keep things going. I got a lot of great Battlefield discussion pieces that I don't want to let slip away. So, what I did last night and this morning was I hopped back into Battlefield 4. I actually hopped into Battlefield 4 on the PC, which I've always owned it on the PC, but I've never really played it there. I spent most of my time with BF4 on the console because that's where my closest friends are. That's where they're available to play. They're not big, massive gamers. They don't spend all this money on PC rigs. They have consoles, and that's just what works for them. So that's where I spent most of my time. But nonetheless, I wanted to hop back into it and play in the PC version, start to finally, level up my character, play it in juicy, Ultra HD, upscaled on my 1070, looks beautiful, runs great. So that was a lot of fun, and therefore you guys got some great footage for that. What I wanted to do though is I want to jump back into BF4. It's been probably, I'm not going to say like I haven't played it. I've played it on and off on the Xbox One with my brother, here and there. But to actually play it and really kind of look at the game, play it without really the end goal of just doing well or playing the game, but more so to look at the way it's been designed, certain elements in it, and how I feel about them when I compare the game to Battlefield 1, to make that point of comparison now. Because the funny thing that happened when I was playing BF1 was it made me want to go back and play BF4. Because I found Battlefield 1 to be such a satisfying experience when it came to its core gameplay, like the gunplay, all of that stuff, the map design. I know a lot of people feel one way or the other about Sinai, but I really like Sinai Desert. I think it's an exceptionally well-designed map. I think it has a few flaws, like every map does, no matter how great a map is. It's never flawless, unless it's Blood Gulch. Anyways... So it triggered a lot of emotions for me. I really was just having fun with the core gameplay. So immediately in my head, I started to get that feeling of, man, I'd really love to play Battlefield 4 because that modern setting, the modern weapons, as much as I like what they've done with, the World War I take, I would, I kind of want to play BF4. So I figured let's boot it up and let's see if that pays off, if I actually jump in and have fun. And the answer to that was no. It's absolutely zero. In fact, I suffered to get this BF4 gameplay for you guys because it just felt like a mess. And I was very quickly reminded of the things that I did not enjoy about Battlefield 4. I think core gunplay, great. I like all that stuff. I love where they went with customization. I think my biggest problem, though, comes from BF4 in a lot of different areas being overly complex. That's something that Battlefield 1 seemingly removes. There's a lot of those complexities that existed in Battlefield 4 because of its time period and because of its point in the franchise's history that simply were ripped away in BF1. And that's obviously one of the positive side effects of that World War I setting is that we're stripping away a lot of the technology. We don't have tanks with 40 different types of missiles on them. We don't have 16 types of anti-tank rocket launchers that are being abused because of the laser guided system and used to kill people inside of buildings. That's BF4. And I always felt like the game just had too much. It tried too hard to push all these unlockables and different progression bits. So people would keep playing the game, and it got really distracted. And I always thought that really ruined the core gameplay experience, which I felt was still great. I don't think DICE lost track of what it took to build a great core Battlefield experience. I just think they then went ahead and diluted that experience with lots of unnecessary bits and bobs. And I was, like I said, quickly reminded of that. That same theme for me carried over into the majority of BF4's maps. I was not a huge fan of the map design in Battlefield 4. It just always felt overly complex. When they did build really big maps, they didn't feel like they were paced really well or that they were scaled really well in terms of the objective points and capture points, whether you want Conquest or on Rush. I just never really had fun with the maps. I can't actually think of a map personally for me in BF4 that stands out as being spectacular. I'm actually really not into any of them. If I have one map that I would say that I enjoy to some degree that is slightly memorable, it would be Guillemond Railway. And that's probably it. I really, for me on a personal level, the maps just didn't do it. And I know for a lot of people, that's not the case. A lot of you guys have amazing memories of some of your favorite maps in BF4, I'm sure. But for me, they got really distracted with scale. Let's build the biggest maps we've ever built for the franchise. There was, I think, a lot of discussion in the office for BF4 is to just bigger. Bigger is better. More is better. And I always felt, again, that diluted and really distracted from the great core BF experience that was still there and still is there, hidden under all of those layers inside of Battlefield 4. So I think what BF1 has done for me is it's felt a lot like Battlefield 3. It's went back to that really great gunplay. I love what they've done with some of the smaller nuances of BF1. You know, when we look at the removal of the minimap, sort of spotting system, I guess you could say. The way, if you guys aren't aware, the way appearing on the minimap works in BF1 is you have to actually be spotted by another player or spotted by an item that, you know, spots things, whether it's the spot scope or like the flare for the recon class or the scout class, or like I said, a physical spot from a player. You are no longer revealed on the minimap simply for firing your weapon. I always thought that should have been the way it was, for lack of a better way of wording it there. You know, I never liked that. I always felt like that makes sense to me more in a really small-scale competitive environment in a game like Halo or Call of Duty. You know, I always felt like Battlefield was like, why give away the player's position just for firing their weapon? Why not, you know, embrace the spotting system or remove it, in my opinion? It was like, go one way or the other here. Which one do you want? Why have both? So I love that BF1 has removed that system. And when I went back to BF4 to play it, I was reminded of just how much of a difference that makes. And I think that makes close quarters firefights that much more intense. You know, you don't feel forced to, I have to run a suppressor in BF4 just to, you know, keep myself off the radar and then take all of these negative hits. Now, everyone's on that even playing field, you know? And no one shows up on the radar. Everyone can really focus on using their flanks, and close quarters combat is so enjoyable in BF1 for that reason. You know, you're not playing to the radar. I really, really like that. To me, that's a huge change to that core firefight experience, and that adds a lot to the BF1 experience. You know, when I really started trying to ask myself, why do I like BF1 so much? It was a lot of those small changes. And, you know, I think that's the same thing I said day one with the beta, is how I was really impressed with a lot of the small tweaks they made to the overall Battlefield experience. And that continues to be the case now that I've went back and sort of made those comparisons to BF4. So all in all, I think DICE has actually done really well. And I know they're getting a lot of flack right now. The connection issues a lot of people are experiencing aren't helping them. And I know not everyone is super into Sinai Desert. But having played Sinai and St. Quentin Scar, I think they're doing spectacularly well with the map design. I think they're getting back to basics. Again, a lot of that is the byproduct of the World War I theme and setting. And I think at the end of the day, BF1 is going to be a better experience for all of that. So there you have it, guys. Really my thoughts now that I went back and just, you know, it was a short personal comparison. I'd really love to hear what you guys have to say. If you recently stepped back into BF4 after spending a significant amount of time with BF1, you know, was there anything that really stood out in the BF4 experience to you, having played BF1 as like a negative, or, you know, something that you're very happy they changed in BF1? You know, what are the sort of the big, like, yeah, I'm glad they made that change decisions for you? Let me know, share it down in the comment section below. You know, let me know what you think of the map design. I think there's a lot of different opinions floating around the internet, so I'd really like to hear what you have to say on a personal level. You know, did you love what they did in BF4? Were there only a few maps that you liked? And how do you feel about what you've had the chance to play inside of BF1 right now? I know it's been a couple weeks it's been 2 weeks, you know, for most of us inside of the BF1 beta. So how has Sinai Desert started to feel after that point? Now that you've built that map knowledge, you know, what do you love and hate about that map? Really, share your thoughts with me down in the comment section below. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.